the question is, how long are we moving well today, right? And I would say not very well. At what point does your body stop healing? It never stops healing. Breathing is the core of my movement practice. And it's so easy because we're fitness professionals and we're nerds and we love this, right? It's the best conversation to have, to talk about what we think is the best practice. But it's so easy to get lost in what we call artifacts of scholarship, where we can have the talk about this protein is better than this protein. What are we arguing about? Like, people aren't sleeping or moving or can't put their arms over their head.
Think, Flow, Growcast mit Tim Böttner. Begleite mich auf einer Reise zu einem ganzheitlichen Verständnis von Bewegung, Gesundheit und Leistungsfähigkeit. Sportwissenschaftler, Ärzte, Athleten, Heilpraktiker, Physiotherapeuten, Biohacker, Osteopathen, Psychologen. Wir tauchen in das Denken und Handeln von Spezialisten ein, um zum Generalisten zu werden. Ein Podcast für Querdenker mit Tiefgang. Hello and welcome. I'm very pleased to have Dr. Kelly Starrett as my guest today. Kelly is a coach and teacher and has had a major impact on the fitness industry over the last 10 years. He is the founder of San Francisco CrossFit, a physiotherapist, author and speaker. His book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, was a New York Times bestseller, and it has also influenced my thinking about exercise, movement and training a lot. Therefore, it is a great honor for me to dig into Kelly's thoughts and actions today. We talk about fitness trends, movement principles, what is really important, and breathing. Kelly lived in Garmisch during his childhood for 8 years, but because we don't want to talk only about Leberkäse, pretzels and Schupfnudeln, the interview will be in English. So, enjoy the episode.
Morgen!
Morgen!
Was frisch, wie geht's dir denn?
Ja, sehr gut. Should we stay in German or switch to English?
Vielleicht Englisch ist besser.
Okay, yeah, pretty good. It's evening right now in Germany. It's 6 p.m. Yeah.
Of course, I should be there, and I'm so sorry I'm not with you right now.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
One of the things on my calendar every year is being in Munich at this time in June. It's terrible. I'm so sad.
Since how many years?
I think this is the first time in 6 years, 7 years.
Okay, yeah, crazy.
Very sad.
Do you travel this year to Germany?
Hopefully, maybe this fall. We'll ping in and see you guys. I miss the crew, and Christian and Eberhard, and everyone is they're like family. So, and part of our plan for our family is that we actually will have a garage in Munich. We'll park the car, we'll buy a car and keep it in this garage with our bikes. And we can come, grab our car, drive around Europe, rent the house in Garmisch, and then go park the car in the garage.
Nice.
So this is the plan.
What kind of car do you want to have?
This is a good question.
Yeah.
Something vielleicht schnell.
Yeah.
Something fast. No, we need an adventure wagon. We just need a van or something, maybe with 4-wheel drive so we can come ski.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm pretty happy to have you here right now. Yeah, I saw you first time 2 years ago, but last year we had a couple of chats and I was pretty impressed that if I can saw your eyes in real life. So I felt that you're really passionate and really, really humble and really honest. So, and that was impressed me pretty much because I know you work since maybe 10 years. I worked a lot with it, but it was a whole new frame if I met you, So, yeah, and the first thing I want to know is, how would you describe what makes your eyes, shine?
I think it's interesting. I've had a lot of chance to think about this with this shelter in place, with what's going on, with the social unrest in the United States right now, and in the world. I think people are what's most important. People are the best technology. People are the reason we should be doing science is to improve the lives of people. And one of the things that I love to do is I love to teach. I'm a teacher. And, I have been teaching adults and teaching kids and teaching movement since I was officially probably 14 years old, when I got my first paid job to teach kayaking. And I really enjoy that relationship. I enjoy the dynamic. I enjoy the intellectual curiosity of understanding who this person is in the moment, adjusting the plan, making corrections on the fly, long-term planning. I can't do, I don't want to do anything else. If you take physio away, no problem, I'm coaching. But if you sit next to me on the airplane, I'll tell you I'm a coach. That's what I do. And continues to never get boring, ever.
Yeah, nice. I thought about the name on the internet. You first called it Mobility What, and now it's the Ready State. And I thought about it a lot. I think it shows a lot about philosophy of movement, because I think Mobility What was like, okay, we have to do mobility as a workout, it's additional, and now the Ready State, for me, it's like, okay, it's like being human, being ready. So how does your philosophy of movement change in the last years? Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're right, because I've come out of a tradition of high intensity functional movement training, barbells, kettlebells, dumbbells, gymnastics, running. I was a professional athlete, but I have always believed, specifically, I have my own feelings about the best way to train and be ready as a human, right? I have my own style. I have things the way I coach and teach. But I believe the most that coaches know their community the best. So if you are teaching people, I believe that you know how to get your athletes ready to run, or ready to swim, or ready to bike or climb or ski, or just generally fit. You know what your population needs, you know the nuances, you know your community. And in the heart of that means that I can be agnostic. I can be independent about the way you think you train, which gives me and gives you a lot of personality, and it's maybe not the right word, a lot of possibility to have favorites, to have styles, to play a certain way, or to adopt a certain mode of training that speaks to you and is motivating to you, that translates well. And we can always have an intellectual conversation about, does this mode of training prepare us the best for this task, right? We can argue about that. But once you begin to see, you'll see that all of these systems have universal overlapping touch points where, the hip is doing this. You have to breathe and be stable. Can you control your body with these joint ranges of motion? Are you exposing the tissues to this systematic loading? Is it a complete practice? And when you start to see it that way, what you begin to realize is, well, all roads lead to Rome. But the most important thing is to realize that the gym was never the goal. To spend more time in the gym was a mistake. The goal was to spend the least amount of time in the gym, so that we could then go into the world and be interesting, to play, to interact, to be robust, to be stable. And for a minute, I think in training, we got very excited about the gym because it's easy to track things. It's easy to see progress. And now we realize, because we haven't been in the gym, how important the community is of the gym. Being able to see people, being able to be recognized, to be seen, to be coached, to be touched, to practice. But, the heart of the ready state idea is, I believe that you know what you want to achieve and accomplish. So your goals are my goals. And that's the only goal that matters. Giving context, giving meaning to the reason people train. And that's the same way, like if you're coached your whole life, you appreciate that people maybe come to the gym because they're afraid of being hurt. So they get a little stronger, they become a little bit more durable. Maybe they want to look good naked, right? They just want to look good in a swimsuit, right? So, you have your Schwimmhosen on and you want to look better in it. That's good enough for me. You had a blood test that showed you that you weren't very healthy. So we appreciate that a lot of people come to the gym, you know, they come because their friends are there, right? And it's a social place. All those reasons are valid, and they're all good reasons, but it doesn't change what we do underneath. Can you do what a human being is supposed to be able to do? And what we haven't done, and what I'm trying to do during this summit, is begin to help us see these. Doesn't matter what style of training, you're an animal flow dancer, great, that's great. Are you exposing the body to all of these shapes? Then we can argue about, well, you probably need some more conditioning, or you probably need to pick something up a little bit heavier once in a while. But ultimately, I want to start to begin to say, hey, we have not done a good job of looking at minimums. What are people supposed to be able to do? And then when we appreciate that, then we can use any system of training as a diagnostic tool, so that we aren't surprised when someone's missing ankle range of motion blows up in their face, and they compensate and they lose power, they lose speed. Because what they'll say is, well, I've been doing this, I've been doing CrossFit, I've been doing, Perform Better, I've been doing Mike Boyle stuff, but why did this happen? Well, it's because we never took the next step of using that as the diagnostic tool to find out how far away from baseline normal, typical, typish, right? This is the goal. So that's really what we're trying to do in the ready state, is say, hey, look, we appreciate that you have a style and a way you like to train and a philosophy, and that's great. How can we help?
Okay, so you won't describe you as you are CrossFit and doing it for CrossFitters, you're doing it for everyone. Yeah.
Very much so. And, I am very fortunate that I get to work in so many sports and across so many different platforms, from Exos to Perform Better, to the CrossFit community, to track and field, to cycling. And so I have to let go of this is only about doing better on the WOD. And, the name Mobility WOD is interesting, because when I started the Mobility WOD, the Mobility Project was 10 years old this September, 10 years. The iPhone didn't have a video camera. YouTube was barely a thing. There was no Gmail. It's a long time ago. And I'll say that no one was using the word mobility. It wasn't a word that was used. We used stretching. It was dynamic warm-up, right? It was flexibility, but no one used the word mobility. So I specifically chose the word mobility and defined it as, you need to know how to move beautifully. You need to have the wiring to generate the most force and to be in the best positions and have the most choice. And you also have to have the range of motion to do that. Because what we know is sometimes just moving more doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't. It doesn't solve the problem. What we see is that people just get really good at moving around a problem. And then that leads us into a whole bunch of, interesting issues where we don't have full access to our position, so we compensate. We don't have a way of managing pain. We think that pain is a medical problem. Pain is not a medical problem. Pain is just information about movement, information about your readiness to move, information about how your brain is thinking about your tissues or thinking about threat, right? That's all pain is, right? Or we've lost the opportunity to enhance and improve our ability to adapt and recover from hard training. And so what we start to see is when we give people those tools, again, what we start to see is that people have less pain, they move better, they can generate more wattage, they win more world championships, they go to the world records, right? They go to the Olympics, they are durable to 100 years old, and more importantly, they can play more, they can explore more. And I think what's happened, and we've seen with the shelter in place, how did we do as a community? How well did we prepare people to take care of themselves? So if this was a test for strength and conditioning, for fitness, where we were like, okay, we're going to cut off, hands off, good luck, viel Glück, go ahead and let me know how you are able to cook, sleep, move, warm up, right? Stretch, mobilize, deal with pain, self-soothe. Can you do all of those things? And if people weren't set up to do that and have been working with us, then we failed. So I think it's, the goal here is to make people more independent and more robust. And I believe in my heart of hearts that strength and conditioning, movement training, fitness is the powerful way in to solve so many of these problems in society.
Yeah, nice. Would you call it mobility again? Or the word mobility is pretty complicated right now. Yeah?
It is. Well, and and it means nothing now, right? Yeah. I think it has become stretching. It has become something else. I'm doing mobility. I'm like, you're walking, you're squatting. That's not doing mobility. Mobility is, again, the expression of these things through movement. And ultimately, the root of that is position. Can you express and do what a human being is supposed to do? There's a thinking sometimes that everyone is very special. There's a feeling that everyone is so unique in their shape of their hip, that everyone has some perfect special squat, right? That you have a perfect special squat for you based on what your hip morphology looks like. This is not true. The research doesn't support this. The mechanics don't support this. And what we do then when we say those kinds of things is we're saying, hey, there's not a best way for the ankle to work, where the foot has the most choice, where the foot is having access to the most physiology. And one of the things that I think is really easy for us to do now, because we have so much sports science, we have good sports measurements, we have so many different fields to look at, is that we can see, why do we move this way? Why is the choice being made in this sport, in this training? Why are they saying the same thing? How does that match with the physiology around the ankle structure? And ultimately, what we want to do is say, hey, look, we think this is a better position. Not that the other position is bad, because that may be the only position you can have now. So it's not bad. It's just not as good as this other position, which means we always have choice to move towards better function, more durability. And when I say function, what I'm talking about is wattage, poundage, speed, right? The expressions of the biomotor output. So what we know sometimes is that pain is a very complicated system. And my genetics, my previous belief of pain, my experience with pain, my previous injury history, my nutrition, my sleep, my stress, right? All of those things, my cultural identity to pain, my exposure to pain, all of those things are implicated in a pain experience. And what we want to make sure that we're recognizing is that one of the ways that we can change people's perception of pain is to change their shape and position. That pain and movement are closely mapped in the brain. And so how clever that your brain really started to pay attention to your positions and made the connection between pain and position, pain and shape. That way it could quickly recognize, I know what you're doing. This has traditionally caused this pain or overused the tissue or brought our tissue sensitization down, so we get mapped. And when those things become persistent or chronic, then the easiest way to change the system is not necessarily to unload a tissue or improve health or decongest, but to change some aspect of the shape or position. And what's nice then is that gives brain potentially a clean pathway in which there's no pain signals, no mapped pain, where I run a little bit differently. My cadence is a little bit higher. I land a little bit differently on my foot. I'm a little springier. And the idea here is that this gives us a chance, one, to immediately always say, why aren't we teaching and moving towards the better expression of function that you can manage in this moment, right? And so, again, if we're going to realize that one of the ways that we can really help people feel better is to change their movement positioning, well, part of that is we're improving the body's ability to handle ground reaction force. We're giving the tissues a better way to absorb force and generate force. The brain also picks up that, oh, look, there are more lights on in this room. That's a more stable, healthy system, right? So that we can unload a tissue, or the brain can change the way it's thinking about the tissues. And once again, we're making choices based on improving people's output, their biomotor expression. so that if we say, hey, you can squat with your feet turned out and your arch collapsed, no problem. We know, and you can get very fit like that. But that doesn't transfer to cycling very well. It doesn't transfer to running very well. It doesn't transfer to moving laterally very well. You lose a lot of function in your hips. You lose a lot of function in your ankles. And that's fine. If this is the only position you can be in, let's work there today. But then the next conversation is, well, how do we get you moving towards having more choice and more power and more output? And that is a very interesting conversation, and a conversation that we already should be having, because we're already doing it because we're teaching movement.
Yeah, interesting. I think the discussion about what we want to achieve from our fitness program, for you and me, it's obvious, but for most of our clients, it isn't obvious. They don't really know what they want to achieve. Yeah.
And I think that that's fair, and we don't have to say, today we're about recovering subtalar neutral in your ankle and having a better, no. Today we're going to train. And all of these physiologies and complex isms are for the coach to understand and program to, but it's also for the person to begin to understand when they don't have or are missing range of motion. Your ability to move freely is a snapshot of today. It's an Augenblick. It's that moment where I get a picture of what you're doing today. It tells me what your behaviors were in the past, how hard you trained, how much you didn't move, your genetics, all of those things. And so what we do then is we say, oh yeah, I'll look at your movement quality every 3 months, and then we're just going to work out really hard. And then we'll go back and test again. Well, that's too far away, because your range of motion changes day to day based on how stiff you are, what you did yesterday, etc. All those things we talked about. Do you play a sport? Well, at the end of a soccer season, you should look like a football player. At the end of the cyclist season, you should look like a biker. Like, you don't have your full capacity. You don't have access to all the shapes. You look like the sport that you did. If your sport is sitting at a computer at the end of the week, you'll look like you sat at a computer. You just won't be able to take a breath or put your arms over your head or open up your hip. This is okay. So what we can then begin to say is, hey, what are the movement vital signs here? How do we help people identify minimums so that they can come in and say, this is what I should be able to do? And if I can't, they know how to fix it. Because if we're going to try to help people manage pain, we can help them address sleep. We can get them to eat better. We can get them to feel safe and to be in a tribe and a community, right? We can get them to warm up and cool down. But we can also always help them to move completely or restore their motion completely. And what we find is the body is so durable and so extraordinary that if we work on those things, then pain is not a part of the conversation. Pain is a very low bar, right? There's a simple test. Can you get up off the ground without using your hands, sitting cross-legged? This blows people's minds, right? I'm like, well, the problem is you don't get up and down off the ground. For 2.5 million years, you slept on the ground, you ate on the ground, you went to the toilet on the ground, you hung around the campfire, right? The body heals itself, it tunes itself, it reapproximates. These are positions that are tuning systems for the body. So if you can't get up and down off the ground effortlessly, we know what that means. It means you're more likely to fall when you get old, which means you're more likely to break a hip and die. It means that you're going to die earlier of all-cause mortality. That means you won't be able to live alone in your home, because if you can't get up off the ground, that's very dangerous. And so what we see is, wow, we really are saying, hey, it's not important. Your hip range of motion is special, and you're special, and don't worry about it. But that's not the case, because the experiment of the human being is 100 years old. It's a 100-year-long experiment. So if you make it to 60 or 70 and you don't make it to 100, or you make it to 40 and you start making the movement window smaller and you keep the choices smaller, then the last 40 or 50 or 60 years of your life are very small and not very good. And that is a lie then. That means strength and conditioning and fitness was for 20-year-olds who wanted to have abs only, then that's okay. If that's what it is, let's just say it. In your 20s, you go to the gym. When you're in your 30s, whatever goes, just get on the elliptical machine, stay in little tiny ranges of motion. But that's not the promise of what we have here. We have the technology. So why don't we do something extraordinary with it?
Yeah. But regarding lifespan, what do you think? How long can we move well as a human?
Well, the question is, how long are we moving well today, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say not very well. At what point does your body stop healing? It never stops healing. You always are able to heal slower. Your tissues are a little stiff. You might need to warm up a little bit more. But when we talk about movement, why should you lose hip range of motion? Why is that? What? Because you don't use it. As you get older, the window gets closer and smaller and shorter, so that if you don't do something more, it goes away faster. That's the difference. When you're young, you have lots of choice and lots of opportunities to continue to practice, to make mistakes, to refine, to get better. The tissue, the body is so tolerant. It can handle so many things. Kindergartners do not warm up before they sprint out to the monkey bars, right? They don't activate their glutes. They don't do dynamic warm up. Boom. They have full access to their positions. They're springing dynamic. So what we can then do is sort of reverse engineer. We can back into, why is Leberkäse really maybe the perfect food, right? Because it has skin and organ meats, right? And, we're supposed to eat the whole animal. We're supposed to have vegetables and fruits. We're supposed to drink water. We're supposed to walk a lot during the day. And what we see is when we do those basic things, when I don't feel threatened because I'm black, right? When I'm not worried about losing my job, then my body is really pretty robust. And then it doesn't take much input or load to maintain these systems. But if for 10 years, I don't put my arms over my head or take a full breath or take my hip into extension or look at my hip range of motion, then all of a sudden you'll see that you have lost choice and you've lost your voice. And then when you end up 100 years old, it looks very different than if you're continuing to walk, continuing to shop, continuing to be in a community, and continuing to train. And training may look a little different. We may pull some of the speed out. We may not do as many snatches when you're 100 years old, right? But if you've been snatching on the way up to 100 and you've maintained these positions and rotation, your tissues are healthy, why can't we be 100 and create our own Olympics at age 100? So, I think your question is, how are we doing now? Well, let's look at our 100-year-olds and how are we doing, and then let's look at what's possible. And now we want to always lay that lens over the top of durability and longevity over what it is we're doing. I think this is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any benchmarks regarding movement and strength you want to test for general health and longevity? Exercise, movement.
So that's really interesting because, do I think you should be able to do a good push-up? Yes. Should you be able to hang from a bar and breathe? Yes. Should you be able to pick something up off the ground? Yes. How much? Well, those things of physiology depend on your training age and experience, right? I think if you go back and look at Natural Movement by George Hebert, right? The original, the godfather of MoveNat. I think what you'll see is his tests of function were really, really hard. 1 kilometer swim, 500 meters swim, a 5K run, some just basics that he was like, this is the lowest level. And I think most of us would struggle to hit that lowest level. So what I would love to do is sort of remove the physiology. So if I'm playing in a football club, or I'm in the military, or I'm doing a specific sport, I may have some standards that helps people just have a benchmark of, hey, we need you to be able to do this, right? But for the rest of us, I'm more interested in your ability, the expression of the position. So if I take the strength out of it and I take the skill out of it, a little bit of skill, it's not like, can you snatch a kettlebell, yes or no, right? But what you see is that, man, if the bar is so low that what we're seeing is that people can't put their arms over their head and take a breath. People can't squat to the ground with their feet together and their heels on the ground. So what am I testing? I'm testing a whole bunch of like how fast your car can go in third gear. That's what I'm testing now, right? I'm seeing how fast you can go with the handbrake on your car set at 2. And the issue for us is we have, everyone now knows that for blood pressure, 120 over 80 is okay. It's not great. It's just a benchmark, right? What resting heart rate is 60. That's gives us a place to start. Temperature, body mass index, right? Body fat percentage. We start to have some ideas around what we should be able to do. Then, depending on your life, depending on how much money you have, how much time you have, we can start to chase this back. We can start to say, you should be able to walk 2 kilometers in 20 minutes. Like if you can't do that, like that's a red flag, right? Because that's really simple, low-level physiology. But what we haven't done, for example, is we can talk about benchmarks, but I'm like, how much sleep are you getting? Can I see? Show me. Because what we've seen is big changes in the environment of the human. And now, once again, I'm measuring a suppressed system. I'm measuring a system that isn't thriving. If you get less than 7 hours of sleep, I'm like, what are we talking about? Why are you sucking? Why you don't grow muscles? Why you're slow? Why you're stiff? Why you keep getting injured, right? Why you've lost your cardio? Because you're basically a constantly stressed human being. And that means to get 7 hours of sleep, you may need to be in bed for 8 hours. To get our benchmark, 8 hours of sleep, you may need to be in bed for 8.5 or 9 hours. But if you have pain or persistent pain or chronic pain and you're not sleeping and you can control that and you're not, then let's control that. So sometimes you and I can easily, and we had this conversation when we first talked, we were like, well, wouldn't it be better to mobilize than move before mobilize and sleep? This was the conversation we had. And I said, yes, but it's better to do some mobilizing or not mobilizing. And so sometimes we have this conversation about, well, how do I go from a 9 to a 10? Or how do I take my athletes from a 9.5 to a 10? But we need to do a better job of taking people from 0 to 1 or 0 to 2. That's where we'll make the biggest change. 0 to 3. If I get everyone at 3, then we can talk about what's the best way of 9.5 to 10. And it's so easy because we're fitness professionals and we're nerds and we love this, right? It's the best conversation to have, to talk about what we think is the best practice. But it's so easy to get lost in what we call artifacts of scholarship, where we can have the talk about this protein is better than this protein. What are we arguing about? Like, people aren't sleeping or moving or can't put their arms over their head. I don't even know why we're having that other conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a big problem. We see in this functional training summit and all the conferences too, that we become so specialized with right now it's neuro-athletic stuff, and we do this pencil push-up stuff for an hour or so. But maybe it works, but yeah, it's your, how did you call it? The artifact?
Yes, an artifact. That's right. And what's really interesting is the people at Z Health and the functional neurology is really picking up on a couple things, that our training isn't as clever as we can make it. It's very easy to integrate these things. Mm-hmm. What the conversations that you're seeing for the best Z Health practitioners, they're also coaches, and they're figuring out, well, we're going to do warm up anyway, right? We're going to warm up today. We're going to do dynamic warm up. Well, why can't we practice these things? So on a couple days a week, we start to integrate what we think are some really solid practices, right? Where I don't have to train the whole body every single day. I don't have to train my brain a specific way every single day. But suddenly we realized, oh, there's a lot of time in the training session to integrate important concepts, to identify that people aren't doing a good job with their eyes. You know, I have a slack line in my backyard, right? So I'm always on the slack line. I'm on the slack line. I have a thing called a slack block, which is a mini slack line in my kitchen. But part of the thing I do is I look down, I look up and see if I can identify something across the street. I look down, I look up, see if I can identify across the street. I look and turn my eyes to the right and sit in balance. And so I'm already doing the slack line. So it was really easy for me to integrate some really simple sort of neurodevelopment training into the training we're already doing. And that's the next future of what we're doing, because we have this incredible opportunity. We have people in our gyms for an hour. The mistake, for example, that I witnessed where people misunderstood what the neurobiology was about and the functional neurology is about is that they stopped being fit. They stopped being strong. They stopped being durable. They stopped training. You know why? Because those things are hard. And it's much more easy to balance and catch something, right? To act like at some point, we have to put you under load. We have to then also make you breathe hard. If not, it's always going to be an incomplete practice. So however you want to do that is your right. However you want to focus on these things, that's what makes you a good coach or not. And what we have to do is get much better as a community of deciding what is essential and how you want to train that thing. That is up to you. There's 100 tools, right? But if I don't hit your energy systems, you're going to go out into the world and have a problem. You know, if I don't hit your movements, you know, if I don't eccentrically load you, isometrically load you, concentrically load you, you're going to have a tendon that is going to fail or not be a tendon when we go play football later on in the afternoon at the game. And when you pull your Achilles or tear your Achilles, that's our fault, not your fault. Because you said, I'm here to play, I'm here to train me. And we're like, oh, you know, I'm not going to expose you to the things that you need to do. Again, it comes back to this idea of, well, how do we know what we're doing works? Well, because people go into the world and they're better at the things they want to be good at.
For a lot of the things that we do in exercise and movement and nutrition and so on, we have an idea why it works, but we don't really know why it works. There are so much layers, and in the last couple of years, science, told us so much more. And a couple of times that we are wrong in what we thought we did, but it doesn't really matter because it worked.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, you know, and let's appreciate that the joint is responsible for a lot of information, and so are the tendons, you know, so are your ligaments. They give you a lot of information. So if you are getting input to those motor sensory systems and you're restoring sliding surfaces and joint motion and blood flow and you're decongesting and, well, it's probably working on many levels all at once. And I think what you really said was true. How do we know? It can be all those things. The brain is the most complex structure in the universe. What? Excuse me? Like, it is the most sophisticated, complex structure that we have ever encountered in the human brain, attached to a body that is incredible and so sophisticated. The spine has so many forces pulling on it. The diaphragm, the spine, the shoulders, the neck, right? What's going on with the intercostals, the pecs, the lats, the glutes. We can't even model the spine because there's too many things. We can say, oh yeah, the spine rotates and flat. Are you serious? Have you tried to throw a ball and really understand and predict the forces? Impossible. But what we can say is, we train this way, we threw the ball faster and harder and longer and didn't get hurt or have pain. Okay, that maybe is a good hypothesis then for why our training is working, right? I'm able to catch a ball more effectively. I'm able to predict what's happening. I use Synaptech glasses and I get better at pattern recognition, right? And again, I think what's nice to your point is it's probably working on many levels. And all of those levels are valid. We can argue about why my style is working and your hypothesis is bad. But again, test and retest, better, same, or worse. And then we can appreciate, here's our hypothesis for the why is this working, but it's really difficult to understand why this is working. And so, in the long haul, ultimately, what we want to say is, here is what we think is a more efficient use of your 1 hour a day. And here's how the rest of your lifestyle then goes in. And then you can be, I'm Kung Fu, I'm Karate, I Jiu-Jitsu, I'm MMA. It doesn't matter. They're all valid systems of understanding how the body moves and how the body fights. So, but we don't have to have an argument, right? We can fight each other and see who's going to win, but the practice itself is still, is the thing. So, I think what we haven't done a good job of is saying, okay, what's essential? And then who do you want to help you follow those essential things? And thank goodness we have choice, because, we all like different music. We all like different food. That's okay. It's okay to have choice.
Nice. Yeah. Another question, what I'm really interested in, if athlete or a client comes to you. So before you ask any questions or do any tests, what do you recognize about what's the first thing in your mind?
Well, the first thing that we're doing is we're establishing a relationship and trust and reading body language and creating a safe space for the person to come and to find out where they have blind spots, to find out. So the most important thing is for someone to come in and feel supported and trusted, right? That this is a place. Our hypothesis is that the person who can express a position, fundamental human position, the hip has this much extension. You can't show me that you have that much hip extension when it's fast, under a high metabolic demand, heavy cardiorespiratory demand, under load and speed and competition and stress. Then you maybe have incomplete hip function, right? And if we look at all the functional training, it's all very slow. And guess what? That's not the world, that's not sport. So that helps us to understand what we're seeing. But ultimately, the person who can handle the position, the shape, create a stable shoulder under the most context, right, means that they're the athlete who can probably pick up this new skill the fastest. They're the athlete who can come up with a new motor solution to the novel problem at high speeds. Their brain, it's like water, and will take up, and the brain will use whatever it has. And if you give the body more choices, the brain will give more choice. So if we start with that idea, then my training session every day is a hypothesis about, I'm testing this shape, which I think is crucial to being a human. So it turns out, one of those shapes is lowering yourself down on two legs, hinging, squatting. And sometimes you need to do that with your torso upright, goblet squat. And sometimes you need to do that with your torso bent forward because you're holding a load differently, kettlebell swing, right? What we're seeing is that I can change some variable, but ultimately the expression is, I need you to be able to keep your spine appropriately stiff, being able to stiffen and control so you can handle better loads, so you can breathe effectively, so you can maintain the fluid dynamics of the spine and length of the spinal column, right? And then pick up your child, pick up the groceries, right? That's really what we're trying to do. And so the idea is I'm trying to then add load or speed or volume or some aspect of some training environment where that becomes difficult, so that my athletes begin to make errors and then begin to identify that they're making errors and self-correct their errors. If I have an athlete who's making no errors, we make it heavier, we make it faster, we do more volume. Then when I start to see them go slower, lose their foot position, struggle to take a big breath, I'm like, okay, now we're at the limits of our ability to learn, to integrate, and to feel back to what we're doing. But if all I say to you is go up and down, you'll just go up and down as many times as I told you to go in a minute, right? And what you're telling me is, whoa, we're doing all this functional neurology, but do you see what you're training over here? Dirty, stinky noise, with bad positions, and you're telling the brain it's okay to eat junk food instead of saying, here's what we think is the best position for you. Again, your feet might be wider than my feet. Your knee may become more forward than my knee. My torso may lean forward, but the principles are the same. The body works in the same way. And so what we then want to do is make sure we ultimately get to a place where people can identify when they stop being skilled, when their skill comes down. Can you imagine driving the car and you're like, I just went faster today, no problem. I had 3 accidents. I had 4, I crashed the car, I burned out the clutch, but I went faster. Well, that's what we've been saying around training. And because we human beings are very, very good cars, then it hasn't mattered as much. But one of the things that I think is a really interesting intellectual idea is, and I'd like to ask people this, I'm like, how do you know what you're doing is working? Well, people are like, well, people get fitter, or they look skinnier, right? But I'm like, this month, this week, this year, how long have you trained someone? How do you know what the inputs and outputs of your training look like over a decade? Have you trained someone that long? We have people in our gym that we've been training for 15 years. We own all of the good and we own all of the bad. We can understand the poor decisions we made as coaches because we've had long enough to understand the inputs and outputs. And right now, we know what good training looks like theoretically, right? Someone went faster, someone had no pain. But how do we know what bad training looks like? How do we identify that? And how do we begin to understand that what we're doing isn't working, right? Because it's certainly doing a lot of work, but is it working? How do we have that conversation?
Yeah, interesting.
I'll see you when you're 100. That's how I know.
Yeah. Recently I read the quote, we never know if we prevented injury. And that's food for thought too, yeah.
I think that's really true. What we can say is I reduced the factors for injury, right? Because I love them. People are like, pain is all in your brain. I'm like, that's true, but I just got hit by a bus, right? And, and then when we go down that pathway of saying there isn't a better way for your brain behavior, there isn't a better way. And again, not good or bad, better, right? Because you're going to be just fine. But I was working with a coach of a top 5 tennis player. She has a hard time picking up the ball to this one side of her body. Turns out she has a divergent problem, right? She can't converge and see, right? So she has this specific sort of eye pattern that doesn't, right? Her coach sees that. It's not a weakness. It's not he was able to see that. And, what we want to appreciate again, to your point is, what is it we can improve? We can improve the physiology. We can improve the tissue tolerance. We can improve the ability to absorb force and generate force. And that is enough. We don't have to say we can reduce injury rates. What we need to do is change injury rates, right? So reducing injury to 0 in sport, what if you crash on your skis? Sorry, you're not that. You may be able to minimize the amount of injury through the tissue, but being a human being is dangerous. There are bears in the world. It's crazy out there, right? And but what we can begin to see is, hey, people who sleep this much, we saw an injury reduction risk. People who ate food, we saw a decrease in this thing, right? People who, and it becomes complicated because, based on your genetics, you may be predisposed for an Achilles tendon problem. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that I don't encode the right kind of collagen to be able to handle not warming up, not cooling down, not eating collagen, being stressed. My tolerances for poor positioning are worse than yours. It means that you can smoke a cigarette, right? Eat Kaiserschmarrn every day, be very happy, and still you'll never have a problem. But I can't do that. So if we're going to talk about injury risk, we have to talk about all of that, right? But what we can say is, how are we doing currently? Well, ACL injury rates in children in the United States is up 400%. Under the age of 14. So I'm like, how are we doing? Well, we're the most diabetic. We're the most obese. We have the most back pain. So how are we doing? We're sleeping the last. We have the most depression. We have the most suicide. Again, how are we doing? Like, you can choose something that's important to you and then run your test against that and say, have we changed that? And so, if you're heel striking and all of a sudden when you're running and then you have foot pain, you're like, well, is that an injury? Well, I don't know. How do we define injury, right? How about this question? So we define injury as no longer can do your job. You can't do your role in society. You can't, right? You have clear pathology or clear injury. Those are the things, right? You have a fever. That's not, knee pain. That's a problem. There's a bone sticking out of your leg. You have rabies of your knee. There's something wrong with you, right? That's a medical problem. Can't go to work. Can't play on my team. Those are equally as important. But that's how we're defining injury. If you have knee pain when you run, that's not an injury. You know why? Because you're still running, right? You're just putting up with it. You're taking ibuprofen and doing a little drinking, just a little Rodler post-run, and hopefully you start to feel numb. And the key here is, we are not even doing a good job of defining. So, if I do these things, do we see less pain? That's been our experience so far, But to say injury, that's tricky, right? So let's not say we can reduce injury risk, right, or eliminate injury, but we can we can set the bar much higher for a lot more tolerance so that we don't get injured. I think that's fair.
Yeah, nice. Sounds reasonable. I listened to the podcast with my friend Max Gotzler, I think 1 or 2 years ago with you.
Oh, yes.
He asked, what habit did you change in the last 6 months? And you told us about ice baths. Yeah? And I really liked the question, and I like ice baths too. But what do you change in this last 6 months? Do you have a new habit or a new insight that changed your life?
Ooh. Let me ask my wife. J-Star, what habit have we changed in the last 6 months, do you think?
The biggest one has been acknowledging that I'm losing it, like going to sleep. Like if I want to sleep 8 hours,
So my wife says, and this is probably true, that if we want to we need to have a more sleep time in bed to get the amount of sleep we want. So Juliet started using a Whoop to track her sleep. And it used to be that we'd be like, we're in bed at 11, we get up at 7, that's 8 hours of sleep, right? I do the math, no problem, right? Well, it turns out that that's not the case because you can lose up to an hour of sleep from being awake or tossing and turning, whatever it is, high stress. And so I'd say that the biggest thing that I have come to believe in the last year or last 6 months is I don't believe that you're sleeping. This is my new permanent belief. I'm like, you're lying to me about your sleep. And until you show me your sleep, I don't really want to care about your heart rate variability. I don't want to know why, we have to begin to draw lines around saying, I can't tell what's going on until we begin to eat food, until we begin to walk, so those are some of the things I think we've started to focus more on.
Yeah. I started to use the Aura ring, I think 2 years ago, and that shows me this fact, So I have my sleep data every night, and I experience the same. To get about 8 hours of sleep, I have to spend about 9 hours in the bed.
I also continue to appreciate, what is essential. I just continue to work. So I'd say that I've become a lot more obsessed in the last 6 to 9 months of how do we do more dynamic single leg work, the work of Franz Bosch is very important. If you haven't read his book, his new book is called Anatomy of Agility. His last book is available in Europe, and it's fantastic. It's like strength and coordination training. I just think looking at as strength and conditioning as coordination training is as effective or any other model as any other thing we're doing, right? Looking at intramuscular coordination and development of skill should be the layer of what we're going on. And if I look back at our own gym, for example, I think why did people have initially massive success with functional training? Because they were holding barbells and kettlebells and dumbbells. They were crawling and moving and rolling. They were just practicing new skills and becoming more coordinated. And we probably saw a change in fitness and outcome simply by being more coordinated than it was because I was stronger, right? Than it was. And so we're starting to see the next generation of super coach, a really smart coach, again, appreciating, hey, we can do all of this in the gym, but why don't we go, kick the soccer ball around for a minute? We'll do more cutting, playing games. We'll do more dynamic movement and loading and decelerating by running around the field playing with the Frisbee than any other thing that we could possibly try to make in the gym.
Nice. Okay, the last question is a bit off topic, but I'm so interested in because last year you did the Wim Hof breathing on the Functional Training Summit, and that stuck me pretty much because I do a lot of this Wim Hof stuff. Was in Poland for a couple of times and I experienced a profound impact on my physical performance during a really hard workout and Wim Hof breathing. So I'm thinking about, are you using the Wim Hof breathing method with your athletes? Did you have experience?
100%. The breathing is the core of my movement practice. It's
the Wim Hof breathing?
Yeah. Well, looking at let's say that with the Wim Hof style breathing of scrubbing off CO2 and then potentially letting CO2 rise very high, getting the brain to be CO2 tolerant. I would say that, and I know he does more than that, and we're so grateful, but that would be, if I had to, just take a slice of what people understand about that breathing, that would be sort of the hallmark of what it is. We are using and have been using breathing now for 5 years as being able to understand the quality of my position, to understand the quality of my effort. So what's nice is that Wim said, hey, we're leaving a lot of performance on the table. But suddenly what we appreciated was, wow, we weren't breathing very well under load. And even people who do the Wim Hof training and then I put them on a bike, they can't connect the dots, right? That's because Wim isn't necessarily in the gym training athletes, right? When I first began working on this breathing piece many years ago, I had a woman who was trying to be the world's strongest man. She was at the Arnold competition in a strongman competition. And she took second. And she should have won, but it was her first. She's an Olympic lifter. She's a phenomenal athlete. But what we would do is we would have her pre-breathe, for example. We didn't understand all of it. But we'd have her pre-breathe a ton. And then so she was already breathing like she was into the event. And then she would run into the event, and she would run out of time before she got tired breathing. And so we were like, oh, well, this is crazy. She just she never breathed hard because she was already topped off. She was already breathing. We've applied this to our Olympic lifting when we focused on the mechanics of the breathing, less about the brain and the physiology, which are really important too. What we saw was that we were getting our athletes to be able to pressurize more so that they could snatch American records, clean and jerk American records. And so what we saw is that suddenly we could use this style of breathing to improve the intra-abdominal pressure and volume of their athletes. But what we see is that when people are in pain, they have altered breathing. So the breathing became the root of our way to desensitize the brain and to restore motion in the spine. So I think what Wim saw was this incredible physiology, allowing the CO2 to get high and have the brain be comfortable with that gave us more oxygen off of the hemoglobin, right? So we could go harder. We could be more toxic without And what's happened now is that the athletes we train, no one ever gets too tired from breathing. This is never a problem anymore. They burn, they can't work hard enough, but the breathing is no longer the limit. We've taken the breathing limit is gone. It's always about the body now. And when we started to look at the mechanics of what was happening, when you take a breath in, you extend. When you breathe out, you flex. So if you're in spine pain, I can do a ton of motion, of restoring motion and dynamic movement to the spine of the chest, which unloads the spine, and I can get some extension and flexion. I can get the diaphragm to work differently from the psoas. I can get, how about moving the lymph through the trunk? Boom. So suddenly what we see is that we see improvements in the system of the contractile field to move and to maintain fluid pressures. And what do we see? Better expression on the bike, better running, better, right? Less compensation from breath holding. So, you know, what we saw was that Wim opened up the door of possibility. And I will be forever grateful because he made breathing, when I saw and really began to, when I did my first course in 2008, someone gave me the notes recently, and I have a section on exhaling and parasympathetic downregulation. We're trying to change tissue. But, man, it was like I kept walking, stepping over the piles of diamonds and gold. I was like, oh, these diamonds and gold on the ground, I'll just keep walking around these diamonds instead of picking them up. And so what we found was that when we began to put the breath in, it unified all movements, it unified down regulation, it unified up regulation, it unified performance, it unified pressure, and that people, so like while I'm sitting cross-legged here, right?
I'm standing
here. That's right. So if I slouch and try to take a breath here, okay, now if I just see if I can take a bigger breath. That's a bigger breath.
Nice.
But I didn't tell myself to sit up and put my head in this position and organize my spine. I was able to say, hey, trust that my body will know what position I need to go in to maintain this breath position. Boom. I never coach posture anymore. What I say is, well, can you breathe in that position? Maybe it's not the best position because breathing seems to matter a lot to the brain. So, you know, when we begin to understand what Iyengar, the yogi, said, nerves are king of the breath is king of the brain, then what we realize once again is that we're always doing this very sophisticated training. But if we're not talking about the breathing, once again, we're missing 90% of the benefit, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Perfect. I really appreciate your time. I think we are, maybe up to an hour. Thank you. But last thing I want to mention is the project about, I think it's called Stand-Up Kids. And I really love it. I want to share this idea. So I think if I understand it right, so you just integrate more movement in schools for kids. Huh?
Yes. The idea is, you know, if we look at the environment, right, and how we're interacting in the environment, we know that when we sit down, we fall below 1.5 metabolic equivalents. Our hips don't work. The spine isn't supported by the hip structure the same way as when we sit on the ground. We tend to compensate into positions that maybe aren't great for growing bodies, maybe don't use enough energy. We start to see the sedentary behavior physiology kick in. So it's not that sitting is bad and standing is good. It's that sitting in a chair isn't great and it's not moving. So when we move children to a platform that gives them choice, that, you know, you and I do not have the same size feet. I wear a size 45. Maybe you wear a size 45. Maybe you wear a size 50
43.
or a size
43.
43. Yeah. Should we be wearing the same size shoe? No. Should we be in the same size furniture? Interesting. I guess that's very strange. So if you have children in, you know, the 5th or 6th class, some kids are very tall and some kids are not very tall, yet they still all are in the same shape. What we look at is, are we putting the amount of input in? So again, if we come back, when we see people who are having a hard time sleeping, one of the ways that we can help them solve that problem is to walk more during the day. That if I accumulate enough walking during the day, then I can get enough fatigue in, non-exercise activity, to actually fall asleep. Also, I load my tendons, I load my ligaments, I decongest, I move, right? I'm designed to move. So we tell all our little kids, go outside, go outside, go outside. We tell our other, you know, elementary school, middle school kids, high school kids, sit. And what we did was move the kids to a standing platform where they have a place to put their foot. If they're sick, they can lean against a stool. The desk supports them. They work in better positions. I never have to talk about posture or organization of the spine or breathing because the environment supports it. So we have seen that the research out of Texas has shown that we know that in schools, most kids gain 2 body mass index points a year, 1 to 2. So they get fatter and fatter and fatter. But the kids who moved more, were given choice, lost 1 or 2 body mass index. So over the course of 4 years or 2 years, you were seeing a delta of 8 body mass index points, and you didn't have to get them to be in a class. You didn't have to teach. You didn't have to organize. You didn't have to hire another person. The children were just moving more at school. Test scores went up, activity went up, choice went up. All of it gets better. And it should be simple to us. If you and I are having a conversation about we need to move more, then it seems to me that we could start with our children and change how their environment works. And it's a very, very easy and a very effective way to do that. We've partnered with, we have about 100,000 kids in the United States now, and we've partnered with University of California at Berkeley, a very big university, and we're doing our first official university study that we're funding here in the fall at 3 elementary schools to look at this choice, which is also moving more and standing at school, but also trying to help people sleep better and move more during the day.
Yeah, sounds so easy. Yeah, would love to see it in Germany or in Europe too. That projects to grow tiny superheroes. Yeah.
Well, and as we said before, let's go ahead and ask, how's it going? How are we doing? Is everyone trending the right way? Doesn't look very good for us right now. So I think that's what's really nice is to say, well, what do you want to measure it on? Do you want to measure it on obesity or diabetics, diabesity? Do you want to look at injuries? Do you want to look at strength? Which one? Attention, school scores? Like, what do you care about? So let's use whatever you care about, and then let's see how we're doing. And what looks like right now is that we're not doing very well. So I think we have a choice.
Yeah, you definitely made an impact, so that's really good. So
We're getting started. It's good.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No. My thought is, I'm really sad that I'm not having Bierzeit with you guys. Yeah. Our new plan is to, as I said before, to get a garage in Munich and keep a car there and bikes. My oldest daughter wants to do a semester in Germany. We love Munich, and we love I feel like when I'm at home in Munich with you, I feel like I'm at home, and I'm very sad this year that I'm not there. So my remarks is that I really miss you people.
Yeah, hopefully we can do it next year.
Yeah. And please save me a Dampfknudel. Thank you.
Wow, so much to think about. Thanks for listening. All the books, links and recommendations I will link in the show notes. You can find them on thinkflowgrow.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share your most important insight with a screenshot on Instagram and link me and Kelly. Also leave me a review on iTunes. But now it's up to you. This information is only valuable for you if you can integrate it. So put into action what you've learned and let's discuss it. I wish you a great week. Tim.